Historically, development has been understood as a transformation, and we tend to think about it as occurring in 4 particular domains. The most obvious one, perhaps, is in the economy, that as a result of development, there is a vast expansion in the range of skills that people contribute to development. When that's integrated through trade, greatly enhances people's productivity and boosts economic growth. The second domain in which this occurs is in the field of social relationships, that people increasingly are able to be chosen for jobs and to choose marriage partners in ways that aren't dependent on their characteristics at birth, such as their gender, such as their religion, their ethnicity. It's not that these disappear, it's just that they become less significant as important contributors for shaping life chances and life opportunities. The third dimension is in the realm of politics, or the way in which power is acquired and transferred within a society. As a result of development, societies are able to choose their leaders and are able to see that the leadership structures of their society reflect the popular will of the people, that people aren't just acquiring power through hereditary means or through some divine mechanism. People come to positions of influence and authority because of the collective decisions of the entire population. Sometimes this will manifest itself in democracy, but not necessarily. In the other domain in which we are particularly interested in this particular program is in the 4th dimension, which we'll call administrative capability. One of the increasingly important things that has to happen as a result of development is that public sectors take on larger, more complicated and more contentious tasks. At the beginning of a development process, they may just be protecting borders, they might just be administering some fairly routine tasks. But as a result of the development process, those tasks become increasingly larger in scale and more difficult in a technical sense, but also potentially more contentious because they require competing interests in a society to be weighed against each other. So an example of a relatively simple task that a government might perform are largely those around logistical exercises. They might just be required to build schools, for example, and erect buildings and to be able to provide textbooks and teachers. As tasks become more complicated, we have not only do the scale of these operations expand, but they become or require engagements with groups that might actually actively resist the kinds of impositions that are now being demanded. So paying taxes, for example, is something that governments need in order to be able to fund the kinds of work that they do. But not everybody would like to be taxed. And actually collecting these resources from some people and redistributing them to others is a large-scale administrative task that requires skills of professional civil servants in order to be able to execute this. Perhaps the most complicated tasks that governments perform are those pertaining to criminal justice, where there are very explicit groups that may overtly and actively resist the kinds of tasks that governments may need to be performed. Other kinds of really complicated and complex tasks are those around regulation, where you have large firms that have a very strong vested interest in not having their activities be monitored and sanctioned or even corrected by the state. So as a result of the process of development, these 4-fold transformations start to occur, usually in synergy or in sync with one another, but sometimes not always together. And a large part of the challenge of development is ensuring that there is some coherence between those different domains. Another important feature of these 4 areas of transformation is that development tends to drive wedges between each of them. So in our developed countries, we talk about the separation of church and state. We saw the separation of powers. We see that judicial and executive and legislative powers are separate realms of government. But in many countries, these are still fused. These are one area of activity. And so it's very important to recognize that how difficult it is actually to create separate realms of activity within each of these 4 dimensions. So together, these are part of what we understand to be development itself, but also what we think is the essence of engaging in development and trying to facilitate transformations in these 4 areas.